All right, well, I want to thank everyone who's tuning in. My name's Eugene. I'm with Occupy DC. I want to thank the panelists and everyone who helped make this event happen. I'm really excited to ask some hard questions and see how our panelists answer. We're here to have a beautiful time. Thank everyone for tuning in. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Misha Green.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today. We're so glad that you could join us for the political and cultural panel hosted by Occupy DC, focusing on racism, police brutality, and violence in DC. We are live from Bus Boys and Poets, Brooklyn, in the heart of DC, the nation's capital where everything happens. And we hope that you are home, safe, and healthy. Occupy DC is an anti-racist grassroots organization focused on ending police brutality, holding politicians accountable, and ensuring the mental and physical health of civil rights activists. They've organized this panel to discuss issues at the forefront of our national conscience: racism, police brutality, and community violence, particularly as it relates to Washington, D.C. My name is Misha Green. Some of you guys may know me as Mimi. I am currently the DC editor for the Afro-American newspapers. I'm born and raised here in this beautiful city. I'm a graduate of Duke Ellington School of the Arts Theater Department, okay, DCPS. We gotta shout it out. We have to shout it out. Just heard, okay? What did I do after that? I went to Fordham University and then University of Maryland for grad school and studied broadcast journalism, and that led me to the AFRO, the Black Media Authority. I've been there for about 3 years in this capacity, and the organization has been around for 128 years. And we ain't going nowhere. So I am super, super happy to be here today. In my spare time, I also need to say I teach Zumba, and I saw that Occupy DC has done some Black Lives Matter Plaza Yoga. I'm just telling y'all now, we can do some Zumba as well. We'll talk about that later. I'm super, super happy to be here, so thank you so much for allowing me to be here and moderate this panel of just awesome, awesome people who are doing great things in the area. I'm super excited to be here with all of these amazing humans. So I think it's time to introduce you guys. Does that sound good? Alrighty. My order is a little bit different, so just wave your hands, guys, when your name is called, because it's not going left to right. And I'm warning those in the audience as well. And make sure, by the way, those in the audience who are tuning in to please, 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 please write questions in the comments. I'm going to be talking to the panelists for a little bit, but we have about 30 minutes at the end of the panel to answer some of your questions. So I'll try to get to as many as I can. So please weigh in, and I'm sure the panelists will love to engage with you as well. All right, first, starting off with Allison Carney, also known as Ace Ono. She is a recording artist, songwriter, producer, cultural curator, and I also have her down as a dot connector. She told me she was that years ago when we met, and that's exactly what she is. And she is really, really good at ensuring that the right people know the right people in the area and can connect and really do some amazing things. She's also a DC native, and I'm super happy to have her on this panel today. Now we also have Chioma Iwoha, and Chioma is also a DC native. Yes, DC all day. She's a progressive candidate for DC Advisory Neighborhood Council. She's an at-large committee woman for DC Democratic State Committee, Ward 7 community organizer. I'm gonna add awesome mom. We were just talking about that. And we know that doing all those things and also momming is a hard thing. And I don't know the other parents on the panel, but I'm already gonna just clap for you guys as well. Next we have Janice Lewis George. Janice is a candidate for Ward 4 council member, hoping to be the first Democratic Socialist in 22 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Wow. She's an executive board member for the Ward 4 Democrats, committee woman for DC Democratic State Committee. She's a Howard Law grad and also DC native.
Absolutely.
And I have to add that she is super friendly and talks to people even when they are creepy. As she was killing it, and congratulations on the election. But as she was killing it and campaigning, I ran up to her in my run one day in Ward 4. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to meet you. Anyway, so she was super nice and did not look at me like the crazy sweaty woman I was. So I was super, super happy to have you on the panel. Joella Roberts, hello, how are you? She is a candidate for Ward 4, she's a community organizer and founder of Migration Matters UDC. I made these like cute little note cards that I should have also been following because I don't have on my glasses, so excuse me guys. She's a community organizer and founder of Migration Matters UDC. She's also a DACA recipient, and she nearly living lifelong Washingtonian and UDC grad. And from my notes I remember, she is from Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, so look, I got it back together. And a recent graduate of UDC, is that correct?
Yes.
And doing some awesome things on campus there. So thank you so much for being here with us today. All right, Marcus Batchelor is next, and he is also a candidate for at-large council member. He is the Ward 8 representative and vice president of the DC State Board of Education and a progressive activist. He's also a DC native. I hear from my aunt, who was his pre-kindergarten teacher, that he's been killing the game forever, even when he said the I have a dream speech, I believe.
That's right. That's the 5th grade. They wouldn't let me stop doing it.
Wow. Well, I'm super happy to see that you are still so involved in doing awesome things for your community, and thanks for being here today. Nene Taylor. Woo! Hello. Nene is a dedicated community organizer, core organizer for Black Lives Matter DC, administrator for the DC Mutual Aid Network, and Life After Release. And she's also a DC native.
Right, all day, every day.
All day, every day. That should actually be first, right?
That's right.
And I also have to say for Nene, she is a lifesaver when it comes to needing a quote for an article. She has saved my life a few times. And given some wisdom, dropping gems. And we're super, super happy for all the work that you're doing with Black Lives Matter DC, and thank you for being here today. Yadia, last but not least, Yadia, aka Justin Johnson. Yadia is also a recording artist, and he is the founder of Long Live Go-Go DC. He is a producer of Milchella and Million Mo March, and is also a native of this area. And I'm gonna call him Yada Yada Berry today. I'm trying to give fun facts for everybody. Because of that song he has on his new album. And it's like, I'm gonna run from there. Yada Yada Berry. So that's did I get it right? That's fine. You can hit me up later for the marketing for that. Anyway, but thank you guys so much for being here today. This panel is definitely a awesome group of people doing great work in DC. And I think with that, can we get to some questions? We can get to some questions. Alrighty, and guys, those in the audience, please remember to engage with us. Ask questions as well. We will try to get to you as soon as we can for the audience portion. Alrighty, so this is for everybody, so get your thinking caps on. The focus of this panel is on finding solutions to end racism, police brutality, and community violence in DC, as we've mentioned before. Can you all speak briefly on your own experiences with these problems and tell us a little bit about how you came to be involved in trying to solve them? Why don't we start with Marcus?
Sure. No, that's a big question, and I think for one reason or another, I think I faced it growing up, but we also face it as a community every day, right? I tell people that, while I'm elected, and that seems great, especially in the eyes of some of my peers, right? I go home to a community every day that's a food desert, right? I have lost friends to an education system that's failed them, or to a criminal justice system, a broken criminal justice system that has jailed them and took their freedom away, took their opportunity away, and when they arrived home, they couldn't find a home, they couldn't find a job. I've served young people for the last 4 years on the State Board of Education and get a front row seat every day to the schools and students that need the most support, getting the least amount of funding, getting the least amount of investment, and quite frankly, at places like City Hall, getting the least amount of thought around creative policy solutions to improve their lives. But personally, I also come from a working class family, right? My father was a postal worker. My grandfather was a grocery store worker. My mom currently serves as a home health aide, going back and forth to work, but she's got to buy PPE out of pocket and still can't, right? Still doesn't have the union protections that allows her to take a day off if she's sick. Those have real impacts on communities, and unfortunately, what we see is that those situations aren't isolated in the least bit, and worse off, they're targeted at communities that look like mine. And so I think, the work, I think I was driven to it through personal experience, that if things were going to change for me and my mom and folks like my friends, that we needed to ante up, right, and get in the game and really not just get a palpable voice at the table, but take a seat at the table and, quite frankly, take the table. And that's just a mission that I've been dedicated to every day of my career. Oh. That was it.
Thank you. No, somebody else, please, feel free. Whoever would like to speak on it next. This is for our perspective. Yes.
So as you said, I'm a native Washingtonian, and I grew up in two different areas of DC. I grew up in Northeast, right around the corner from here, and I went to school in Northwest. And I didn't have an understanding because I literally wasn't around a lot of children that looked like me, that the problems existed here the way that they did. It wasn't until I experienced racism personally that I didn't understand it. I was one of those, black kids that literally didn't understand that there were people that had difficulties in this town or in the world for that matter. And it only took one time, I might have been 8 years old, for my life to be about service for us. And since then, that's what it is. I mean, everyone that looks like I look should have the same opportunities that I've had. And that's why I do the work that I do. And that's literally it. And I think that, when we're all coming together and working together to try to make change, a lot of times we're coming from so many different places that we forget to see the common denominators. And I am, that is literally my goal, is to see these denominators and mush them all together. If I think there's a disconnect. So that's all.
Thank you.
So, thank you for the question. I'm surprised to answer, I'm just kidding. But I grew up in Washington, D.C. I came to the United States when I was 4 years old. And, okay, I'm gonna do it like this. And I attended DCPS, right? Going to school where I walked through a metal detector every day. And as a dark-skinned girl that had emotional issues that I could not pay therapy for, I often was fighting, always was getting involved with the police at a young age before I could get deported, right? This is before they knew I was undocumented. So I was getting in trouble with the police at a young age, right? Got a little bit older, went to McKinley Technology High School. Really didn't have that many run-ins with the law. I couldn't because I was getting older and I was understanding my position in this world, and particularly growing up in a low-income family, a mixed status family, my mother working under the table for below minimum wage as an undocumented woman, and knowing I had to tighten up, couldn't be interviewed with the police. And then growing up, seeing the same things in my community, a lot of my friends disappearing, and then hearing that they were at DC jail, and really just being committed for a long time about the abolishment of ICE, particularly as a Black migrant, and knowing that their policing is of many different forces, and knowing that it's very important that people understand that, right? And so how I got particularly involved in this movement and this fight is because I remember that I was a young girl, and I knew that it was inequitable, that just for the status of like your immigration status, that you didn't have access to education, you didn't have access to housing, you didn't have access to a lot of things, even as a DC resident, and being really disgusted by that, and knowing that oftentimes my community doesn't have a voice, doesn't have a say, and being fully committed to making sure that my community, all of those that I represent, has a say. And particularly in the Black Lives Matter movement today, I was in one of the first protests with Raheem Hakeem. I know y'all know him. He was the first one to lead a protest in DC after the George Floyd murder, and I was there the next day. Like, hey, Heem, if I get locked up, I'm not going back home the next day. Like, it's very dangerous for me. And he was like, girl, we got you. Like, stop playing. And so that's how I got committed, and I was outside literally every day for following the murder of George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, but also the nameless Black women and Black migrants that we didn't march for. So I'm here for them continuously.
Thank you.
Well, first I want to say thank you to Occupy DC, Eugene, whose birthday is today. Happy birthday, Eugene. Mahadi, and all the people who have organized this event. I think these conversations are extremely important. My name is Chioma Iwoha. I'm a child of an immigrant, and my mother's from the South. The last recorded lynching in the United States, she went to school with him. So there's always been conversations in my household about white supremacy, the ways that it has impacted my family. And we have a long legacy of people who've been impacted by racism and racist, white folks. Both of my parents, I grew up in a lower middle class household. So, and both of my parents were hard workers, still hard workers. They worked every day. I did not see them often, and I was in a lot of after school programming. So how I ended up coming into this work is that my mom didn't know where to put me. Like, after I got out of school, she was still working, and she was trying to find somewhere to for me to spend extra time, and she ended up, by the grace of God, finding my lifelong mentor, Miss Lewis, who was running a youth program out of Flock, uptown, called Determined Teens Take a Stand. So I was a 14, 15-year-old, fucking up shit. We were talking about issues that impacted us, and we would be going to, at the time we had the State Board of Education that had actual power, and it wasn't run by the mayor. And, we would be advocating for things and talking to peers about the issues that impacted us. So I was a 15-year-old talking to other 14 and 15-year-olds about what we wanted to see in our community and trying to figure out and organize how do we get those things. I went to an African-centered high school, Kima Public Charter School, that, Michelle Reed actually closed. And, I tried to organize to keep the school open, but while it was there, we were organizing and we would get extra credit for doing protests. My principal would shut the school down so we could go watch a African-centered movie, and that's the type of education that I received, and it's so important, and I'm so happy to hear Marcus speak to the educational needs in our community and the lack of resources that we have, that a lot of people on this, and I know a lot of people up here personally, a lot of us, this is not our first time doing this work. We've been doing it for a very long time. And we have people who poured into us. And what we're doing is pouring into other people. So that's, why I'm here, is to offer a voice. But the reason why I ran for office was because I wanted to make sure that more kids got the type of education that I got and were able to get the mentors that I had when I was coming up.
Okay, go ahead, Nanny.
Yes. We just got friends. We don't know.
There was a singing switch I want y'all to know, and it's because they wanted to go.
For me, being a DC native, first, I actually didn't choose the movement. The movement chose me. as a child, I witnessed my uncle drive a black woman hanging from a pickup truck during the civil rights movement to Washington, D.C. because he felt that black women were being crucified. And I didn't understand that because I was young and I had to ask my mom, why is this black woman at our house hanging from a cross? Like, that was crazy to me. So I had to be taught what was going on then. And my mom actually ran the campaign for Willie J. Hardy. If you all don't know who Willie J. Hardy is, and you're in D.C., look her up and you're going to find out who she is. She's a powerhouse, right? And so Willie J. Hardy actually was on the council. And so I was that little girl doing the flyers. I had to run around because back in the day, we had support in our communities, and you can do that. You can go down the street and you're going to be okay because you knew your neighbors, and the lady down all the way down 10 blocks from where I live knew my mom and knew my name. So I couldn't do nothing because she'd be like, I'm going to call your mama, Nene. And I'm like, okay, Miss So-and-so. And so therefore, I've always been in the movement. And what brought me to in school the same way. My mom, 12th grade, I ain't gonna know because I didn't know if I was gonna graduate. Because the history teacher called my mom and told her that I was the ringleader of her circus in the class. And it wasn't that I was a ringleader, I just thought the kids were people too. And I didn't like the way they treated us. So I always had a mouth in school, sticking up for everybody. So I had like a 3.5, but I never got on the honor roll because I always got a U.S. citizenship. And you always knew you never could make the honor roll if you had poor behavior. So I didn't care about the poor behavior. And right today, I really don't give a fuck about the behavior. Don't police my behavior. And so I'm still the same person that I was when I was a little girl in school. Don't police me. And so when Trayvon Martin died, I had a son his age, and I took to the streets. I literally stood in the streets. If you ever go to my page, by myself in the middle of the highway with Sandra Bland was killed by the police. Sign just standing in the middle of 395 highway, blocking the traffic from coming from the bridge with me and maybe like 5 people. And actually that's how, Chi-Chi don't tell y'all the secret, but that's how I met Chi-Chi because I joined Black Lives Matter DC, and Chi-Chi was one of the co-organizers. Chi-Chi used to be my boss, y'all. And no, she literally was one of the core leaders of Black Lives Matter. And so, she made decisions for Black Lives Matter. And so, literally that's how me and Chi-Chi met because Chi-Chi used to be a co-organizer with Black Lives Matter DC. And that was years ago. Like she said, we not new to this work, we true to the work.
Absolutely. I guess I would say just a story about so many. I grew up here. I'm a DC native. I grew up on 2nd and Kennedy Street. Back in the day, we used to call that the KDY. It's a go-go song. Don't ride through the KDY. And growing up on Kennedy Street and dealing with, when we talk about how have you been impacted, gun violence is a public health crisis in our community. And I was at a meeting with some young people who were organizing around gun violence, and they had a question. It was like, when's the first time that you heard gunshots? Or how many times a week as a child did you hear gunshots? And I was like, I don't remember when they started, but I would say all the time. I mean, it was something that just was a part of, our community, and we had to be safe. And so, my mom wouldn't let me walk to the CVS by myself. You walk to the corner store, you gotta walk with your cousins, your brothers, but it was still a sense of community for us because we took care of each other. We kept us safe in that way. My next door neighbors, Miss Wallace, my mom had to work nights, she took care of us. And I guess for me, I realized probably, I went to DCPS schools too. I remember going to Rudolph Elementary, which is on 2nd Street. It's now closed as well. And then for middle school, I ended up going to Deal Junior High School. And I got to go to Deal actually because my grandmother was the lunch lady there. And she wanted her grandchildren to have access to good education. And so when I went to Deal for the first time, I remember getting on the bus, driving across Military Road, and just the first time I crossed Military Road, I didn't even know I was still in DC. Mm-hmm. And it just looked completely different, from just like the houses to the grocery stores, you know, just kids being able to play on the playground. But there was also just this huge difference in education and opportunity to education in our city. And every day I would go back to Kennedy Street, and you know, I watched some of my classmates go to different schools in our neighborhood, and we all just kind of went in different directions. And I think it was just then, at the age of like 11 years old, that I realized, like, you know, your zip code or who you were connected to determined much of your access to opportunity and success in this city. And I just thought it was bullshit, you know? And that's really, you know, so at a young age, like, you know, like Marcus said, I was enraged. I ran for school board to be the student representative on the Board of Education. And I got to serve on the school board. This is pre-mayoral as well, with people like William Lockridge, you know, who was speaking truth to power out of Ward 8. You know, I got to sit on the board with Peggy Cooper Capers, and I saw these people. And so I started to realize, you know what, you know, we have to be in these positions. I think, but the critical point for me is when I came home from undergrad to attend law school at Howard University. And I was met with the news that the house that we grew up on, 2nd and Kennedy Street, that the rent had gone up twice since we had been gone. It was going up a third time. And my mom, even with a good union job, my mother's a postal worker on the front lines, still right now, providing her own PPE materials as well, you know, couldn't afford for us to stay there any longer. And, you know, we ended up having to leave, be pushed out of that house. And so many other residents, we're talking a total of 22,000 residents have now been displaced from this city. And there was a moment I was ashamed to tell my story of displacement, until I had a moment where I realized it's nothing to be ashamed of. This didn't happen on purpose. I mean, this didn't happen by chance. 22,000 residents don't get pushed out of a city by chance, but it was a plan. And it was a plan, and there were people who made policies that allowed this to happen. And if we're going to change the way the trajectory of this city is happening, we got to change the people who make the policies. And so I became one of the people. Chi revved me up, no lie. Chi was like, we're going to do this, you're going to do this. And so I stepped up to the plate to do this, and I've been fighting, you know, ever since.
Safety first.
Hold on, I got it.
Put a spray on the mic, not your phone. Second of all, I got my COVID test results back today. I'm negative. If you don't believe me, I'll let you check my email. But yeah, okay, so like I said, like Mimi said, my name is Justin Yada Johnson. I don't know if y'all can see me in the corner. Yep. Shout out to my Hottie. I don't know if he tried to sabotage me or what. But shout out to Occupy, man. Thank you for having me, Mahadi. Very classy of you, man. First and foremost. But yeah, like I said, how I got to this space, I'm a firm believer in God. People like, how you do this? I'm like, man, God, you know what I mean? Because I'm a firm believer in going with the flow. I'm very connected spiritually, and I understand it's a spiritual experience. I'm definitely keen in knowing that everything is about divine timing, and every moment is the perfect time. So I got into this space maybe like a few years ago when I led a rally against the Amplified Noise Amendment. I've been in arts and culture in the city for like the past 15 years of my life. Janice could tell you she used to be at a lot of my parties when she was in high school. So if y'all want any real dirt, y'all can come get the resume. Seen many go-go pictures with Janice in it. So you know, I'm always fighting for the music. I've always been involved in the go-go culture, you know, the arts, things of that sort. So when I saw some legislation that they were looking to oppose, the city council was looking to oppose the Amplified Noise Amendment, I did a rally against that. That was in 2018, and after that rally, I basically led a rally in front of the White House for 185 nights, speaking against the corruption in the Trump regime. And we hosted many guests, and it was a great experience. And I was able to take a lot of the go-go musicians I knew all my life to basically use music as a messaging tool, and basically be able to galvanize people in front of the White House. And there is where I realized the power of music and how it truly is the universal language. So I felt like it was only smart to infuse politics with culture to make an impact, which kind of birthed the whole Mochella idea, which I like to call the intersection of culture and politics. So pretty much that was my whole introduction into this space, and my whole concept and method of using music as a messaging tool I think is very important. And like my friend LaDon Love always likes to tell me, there is no movement without music. And that's what I like to bring to the table, and I think that we've been very impactful. We're very thankful and grateful to be able to be a part of that. When we talk about police brutality and racism, I don't like to talk about instances because this is something that's still alive and well. When I leave here, I'm still going to watch my back when I get in the car and I see a police pull up behind me, without even knowing that I did something negative or broke a law. It's still that stigma that as a black man in America, there's a target on my back, and that's not something I have to explain to you all. So no matter where you live, any inner city area, the suburbs, whatever state you frequent or you live in, we can all succumb to police brutality. We all have had run-ins with the police, male or female. We all don't perceive them as public servants, but we kind of perceive them as the opposition, and I think that's where the problem lies. And I'd like to educate the community, our community, first and foremost, because my stint at the White House showed me how disenfranchised we've become with politics and how much we don't pay attention and how this is what truly make the world go round, So I felt compelled to be able to put a lot of these terms and policies in the layman terms for the people that we actually see on the street every day, which is the community. Because like I said, going back to the concept of power being in the people, people that are sitting in office and are taking these seats, they are afraid of mobilization. They're afraid when they see people, showing unity and having their voice heard and being, and showing dissent. But silence is violence, right? So, we've been, it's a new black revolution right now. I've seen a lot of these faces right here in the street, Occupy DC. I've been seeing them do a lot of work, and I admire each and every one of us because it's bigger than just one person, and it's going to take a collective effort. And we may not all be taking action the same ways, but we could all be moving in the same direction. Because like I said, these issues aren't going anywhere. Police brutality isn't going anywhere. Racism isn't going anywhere until we find some type of unified front to be able to show a real threat and actually take it. They're not gonna give us anything. We're going to take the respect and take the equality and take the progress. So that's how I look at it, pretty much.
Thank you all very much, and thank you to Occupy DC and all of you all for your immense service that you're doing for the community. I follow many of you on social media and have no idea when you sleep, but I thank you all so much for what you're doing. Alrighty, so Janice and Marcus, both of your platforms, let me take this down. Both of your platforms discuss a public health approach to gun violence and on redirecting the bloated MPD budget to programs that meaningfully decrease violence. Hey Mimi, you think you're in this one too? BLMDC has advocated for community-based models of violence prevention and interruption. What does a public health approach mean, and what do these models look like, and why do you think they work better than policing at solving societal ills? Let's start with Jamie's.
Awesome. So when we talk about a public health approach to violence, I don't even like saying it anymore because so many people in the city now have been using that line. We're going to take a public health approach to public safety. So now I had to step away because people were taking that talking line because I wanted them to understand what this means. It means looking at the idea of gun violence and violence in our communities as a public health crisis. And the same way you will address a public health crisis, you will focus on what first? Prevention, right? So it means instead of being reactive to communities, you would be preventative with communities. And so when we talk about what a public health approach means, it means getting to the root causes and focusing in on prevention, right? We have a pandemic, which is a public health crisis right now. If we had the same energy we have right now in trying to solve COVID as we did in trying to solve violence in our communities, we would could be further than we are. So what that looks like for us as a community is we know that cycles of poverty and trauma produce violence in our communities and is the cause of violence in our communities. So we have to start ending cycles of poverty. How do you end cycles of poverty? Well, you end cycles of poverty by investing in communities. Where does investment look like? Investment in education. Right now, we know that you're not investing in communities because right now you're taking librarians out of school when our literacy rate in DC between black students and white students has continued to grow. We know you're not investing in education because black and brown teachers are continuing to leave our system at a rapid rate, and you're continuing to not use their voices or amplify their voices. We know that you're not investing because our schools, specifically east of the river and on the northwest side, public schools are closing every day. So if you're going to talk about ending cycles of poverty, you got to start in education. You also have to start with healthcare, right? We lost United Medical Center, we lost Providence Hospital, and now we're settling a contract right now where they're not even trying to have a unionized hospital east of the river at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. So you're going to have nurses and doctors, black nurses and doctors, losing their job in this new development. But we talk about health. We have the highest rate for for mortality with black mothers and black infants in our community. And so if you were going to invest in education and invest in health, that means you would fully fund birth to 3 and we'd have universal child care for all in our community. So we're talking about health and access to health and how we don't have it. And health also includes food. So why is it that we have food deserts east of the river if you want to invest in communities and you want to understand that what it looks like is not just education but housing. Housing is healthcare and housing is a human right. So how is it that we still have homeless populations and you have this city going around kicking people out of and stealing their tents as they try to find a place to live where they're suitable? And so if we're going to talk about it, we have to say cycle, and we have to talk about it from the lens of wealth. Why have we as a black community not been able to amass any amount of wealth in the last 100 years in this community? And when we talk about things like asking for reparations, you get offended. But we have never been able to have an opportunity to have real wealth in our community and build wealth in our community. So when we're asking for reparations, it's because it's deserved and it's needed. We still have student loan debt, even though black women are at school getting higher degrees, but we can't even own homes yet because you're using debt to keep us from progressing as a community. So for me, what it looks like is a real investment in our community. What it looks like is when Deon K was murdered by the police department, the next day you had people calling into question Black Lives Matter and what they're doing in our community instead of calling into the question the fact that the community that he lives in doesn't have a community center. Not calling into the fact you were so ready to get up in arms between your people, right? You're ready to fight each other instead of fight the system that creates this. It's we talk about investing in our communities, it's ending this system of capitalism that has allowed this to happen in our community. Every person on this panel, and I'm going to end, but every person on this planet, every black person on this panel is a miracle. It is a miracle because of slavery to Jim Crow to everything we've been through. This system was made for us to fail. When there is a white construct, that there is whiteness at the top and we are black people at the bottom. And so until we address that, we aren't going to make any strides. And so I am tired of people having a problem with us talking about defunding the police when you have been starving our communities for the last 100 years, using our labor for free. We want to talk about Labor Day? Let's talk about it, because black people have been given free labor our entire lives. You know what I mean? So I don't want to hear people, always, up in arms about us telling to defund an institution that was made to protect capitalism in our community. Police departments were created to keep the control of slavery, and then after slavery, it was made to protect Jim Crow laws and to protect white supremacy, and it continues to be a hoard of money to white supremacy. So start to fight to invest in our communities, from education to housing to health care. We're asking you to care about us, and to everyone in our community who wants to have infighting. That's not the way this is going to work. When we come together and we build power and we fight and we ask for investments, we will see change. And so that is what a public health approach looks like. It means acknowledging the racism that this country has been built on. It means atoning for the racism and giving us the reparations and the repair that we deserve as a community. Sorry.
You can go ahead and rock the mic as well if you want. That was I forgot that I was the one who needed to move Marcus, would you also like to touch on that public health approach?
Sure, absolutely. No, I totally agree with my sister council member on all of those things. I also think it means understanding that public safety does not start or end with the police department, right? That the most affluent and the safest communities, right, happen to be, right, the same in our city. And the folks in those parts of town don't say that I live in the safest neighborhood in DC because my police patrols are the best in the city. It's because folks have access to opportunity, that folks can work one job and raise a family and live affordably at the same time, and aren't working 2 or 3 jobs like we are on the other end of the city, right, just to make ends meet at the end of the month. It means that they have a hospital that works for them, and it also means that they have a grocery store that's not 3 bus rides away. It means that when we talk about a hospital and a healthcare system that works, it means that we're not letting black young people, to Janice's point, and black mothers die at 3 and 10 respectively times the rate of their white counterparts. It also means that in a city that's just and really cares about making sure that all boats rise with the tide, that black families wouldn't be bringing home at the end of every year the same this year that they were at the height of the financial crisis in 2008, while white incomes have skyrocketed in our city. It also means that housing insecurity, right, isn't as prevalent in our communities. It means that we're not allowing black mothers and black children to sleep on the street, or when they're lucky enough to find a unit in public housing, that they're not living in squalor, right, where they can't breathe, where they have a higher rate of asthma, where they have a higher rate of chronic disease. And those communities aren't right or hubs for opportunity that allow for economic mobility. And so a public health approach means focusing in not just on those communities, but also realizing that it's not an infinite amount of people doing the shooting in our communities. If we realize that if it's a finite amount of people, there's a finite amount of families, and it's usually generational, that if we targeted resources to those families, it would make a world of difference in improving safety in our communities. But what we've decided to do, because of police unions and gun manufacturers, right, that we spend our tax dollars, by the way, to buy weapons from them for things like our police departments. And it also means big lobbyists like the NRA, right, who allow not only, right, gun laws to not be stricter, but also flood communities like mine, right, with guns, and then raise the penalties for owning an illegal gun, and then when they catch you with it, they shoot and kill you, right? Those things, right, both on the front end and the back end, are designed to make sure that safety is not prevalent in communities that are majority black and brown. And so it's about, for sure, investing in those things, and it's about defunding broken systems that aren't securing safety, right? We add money to a police budget every single year, and the sense of safety, both theoretically but also tangibly, right? The rise in homicide rate, 50 young people have been fatally shot or stabbed in our city since the beginning of 2019, right? That sense of safety hasn't improved with what we're doing. And so it is about radically reimagining what public safety looks like, and then making sure that our dollars follow it. It means making sure that it's not that police to students aren't twice the ratio of students to mental health clinicians inside DC public schools. It means that MPD's largest contract isn't $25 million with the public school system. It also means making sure that at the end of the day, we have the mechanisms to keep our own communities safe, right? And that means building community and investing in community building. So those are some of the things that I've been thinking about, some of the things that I've been proposing, including a guaranteed income program for our lowest income residents that raises their economic floor. Those are the real solutions to public safety and the things I've been fighting for.
Thank you, thank you. Mimi, what's that model look like to you?
Look, it looked like why BLMDC have created the NERAC. They input with several other organizations, because we don't want everybody to think that BLMDC was the only person involved with the NERAC. We were just a piece of the puzzle. It looked like why BLMDC Janice was the first candidate that we ever endorsed as an organization. That's what public health safety looked like. And I'm gonna cut this short. It looked like Marcus getting into that council, him and Denise making public health safety come to life and be real in DC. I said, ain't no need to hold on. They said it all, right? Pass the mic.
Thank you. Shinoma, you were next. All right, so you were at the block party last month in Ward 7 where unfortunately gun violence erupted, resulting in many injuries and the death of one young person. And you've spoken about the traumas of gun violence that plague many communities. And thank you for your transparency and even saying that you were out there. I remember you posted about it and you were handing out PPE, again, doing the work, serving the community when all that happened. In this movement to defund police, we still recognize that many communities aren't safe and crime rates have increased everywhere because of the financial pressures of the pandemic. Under these circumstances, how do we convince the public and our elected officials that reallocating money away from law enforcement and towards other interventions will be more effective, especially when the outcomes of those programs will not be seen immediately? I know that was layered.
You laid it on me.
Layered.
I was out there with my close friend who's actually here today, and we were passing out PPE. And it was a lot of people. I've lived out in on Du Bois for about 3 years, and this is an annual event, and nothing has ever happened before. I went out there trying to do a good deed, trying to build with community folks, because I am running for ANC in that area, and we had a mass shooting. There were over 100 rounds that were fired. And the reality, even within almost dying, and not once did I say if more police were here, would I have been safe. The police were there, and it still happened. So that within itself tells you that the police do not keep us safe. They are not the solution to gun violence in our city. And Janice and Marcus hit it on the head for all the reasons why that is. We are in the middle of a public health crisis right now. People have been stripped away from their social circles. A lot of people are suffering. It's not only an economic crisis, it's a mental health crisis going on. A lot of people are on the edge. We talk to a lot of our friends who do not have steady income coming in, right? Who cannot afford to go to a counselor and talk to somebody. And we have to show up. I'm there for my community. I have to show up for the people who cannot. I'm people's counselors. People are calling me. So, I definitely think that we can't just fun. And I think we have to tell these folks that we're already doing the work. We're already showing up and doing the things and building institutions. The DC Mutual Aid Fund. Giving people the resources that they need, building up institutions that we need to see in order to alleviate the pressures in people's lives, right? When I'm feeding kids in my community whose parents cannot feed them, that's me showing up, right? And doing the work that our government officials are not doing. A lot of us who do have jobs, thankfully, and have been able to sustain income, are showing up. We are the ones who are filling in the gap where the government is just not doing their job. So I think that's what we have to tell people, that we're already doing the work. We're already finding alternatives to policing. A lot of people in our community do not call the police first. There's a lot of folks that I talk to who actually call the police last, and are already calling community folks. When I have an issue, I'm calling your mama. I'm calling people who are connected to you, who can get you right? I'm not on the phone with the police, and unless it's an immediate. There's a gender, They may just point out that there's domestic violence and stuff like that. Sometimes you need that immediate response. But we still, defunding the police is not only about destroying institutions, it's about building new ones. And I think that once you tell people the type of institutions that we already currently are trying to create, that they will buy into the idea of something new, because they know that the police currently usually show up after the issue has happened. They do not prevent them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this question is for Ace and Yadia. I'm sort of going to combine these two, so if you have to take some notes or listen really carefully, please do. So first of all, as artists and musicians, what do you think is the place of art and role of artists in a movement towards racial justice? That's number one. And then since you guys are both involved in this as well, I'm just going to combine this. Mochella is not just a concert, but a form of protest and activism. Why do you see art and music as an effective form of activism? And can you speak to the relationship between the decline of go-go culture in DC and other issues faced by the Black community here and elsewhere? I know that was a lot, but I pre-warned you. Why don't we start with you, Ace?
So I grew up in DC, and I went to Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts. And maybe like 2012, when I'd been out of college for a while, I came home and I did a crowdfunded program called Millennial Trainings Project. We had to raise $5,000, and you had to have this initiative to do something. You had to figure out what this something was, and you had to make it happen across the country. And they gave you, you were on a train for 10 days across the country. There's an artist by the name of Gino Young who used to write for Jill Scott, and he had a song called Musical Revolution, and it inspired me in a lot of ways. And when I got home from school, I said to myself, I knew I was an artist, and I knew I wanted to do all these different things, but I didn't know how to make it connect. And when I got on this program, I went across the country trying to explain to people in some mass way how music frequency literally affects how you comprehend things, the actual megahertz of things, and the way when you go to a grocery store, they play certain things so that you'll buy certain things. When you go buy shoes, there's actually a science behind it. And because I knew that, I have a very different kind of voice. I don't know why God put me here, but I know I'm supposed to be here. But when I sing or when I'm speaking in those ways, there's a frequency change. And because I connected with that, I might have been maybe 20-something, early 20s, and I said, everything that we do in life, there's a connection to music. If it's war, if it's peace, if it's famine, if it's racism, it doesn't matter what it is. And there's a quote, it's a kind of random quote, but it's something I apply in my life all the time. My father once said to me, there are only two superpowers in the world that you have to worry about or be in tune with. And it's the need, in the time of struggle, there are two things that are going to be present. He said, the vices are going to be present, but the need for healing is always going to be present, and that's the frequency, and that's the form of music. And so what's going on right now in the world, it's in our country for sure, but what's going on in the world is we are bereft of something, and we don't know, everything, it's a piece of everything right now that we're bereft of. And what I'm finding, and it's why I jumped into the scenes that I jumped into, when you connect advocacy, action, all of those different things to something that people can understand, it makes a bigger impact. It doesn't mean the impact isn't already amazing, but it adds an element of understanding and comfort to people, and it makes them buy into things better. So if you're able to use a message positively, then you can make a change. That's why. So, but I'm going to leave the go-go. I'm going to be honest with you. I did not grow up in the go-go community in DC. I listen to it. I love it. I went to go-go's, but I can't speak to, no matter the work that I do, I can't speak to that. I work with people I work with because I believe in what they did, and I believe in the connections, the correlations they made. So yeah, I'm going to let you take that one.
Okay. So, first and foremost, I'd say artists are the real politicians. That's what I always like to tell people, because politics is nothing but a game of influence. And I look at it like a big soap opera when you look at, people who want to take these seats or they want a name in politics or make an impact in politics, you are not going to do that without swaying the people. And you're not going to sway people with just policy, black and white. You're going to sway people with your charm and how you deal with them and the energy that you exude when you walk in a room, and that's what people feel. So I say artists are the real politicians because I feel as though artists are the only people powerful enough to really fight against any type of system, right? The system is very powerful and these systems have been in place for years, but artists are also so influential and impact the world so much that they can gain huge followings and get people to open their eyes. That's why you see a lot of artists no longer here with us. So that's the first thing. Secondly, as far as go-go, I think go-go music is very important to activism in the city. One, because it's heavy percussive. It's definitely from the area. You know, the drums move people. That's our culture, period. So I just think that it's very conducive for the rally and very conducive. I feel like music, us bringing music to a rally fills a void, right? So I always look at rallies and people, you know, that are taking action, marching, whatever. I feel like the energy level, it's hard to keep the energy level up, and I think that's what music does. Also, like Ace said, you gotta give people some of what they want. Like I like to say, you give people some of what they want and a lot of what they need. The some of what they want to me is the entertainment, is the culture. A lot of what they need is the message, the experience, and what they feel when they leave these spaces. So that's why I think it's so important to implement culture. And I think that it's provocative, right? So it's like, people love that. People love provocation. People love, you know what I mean, disruption. And that's another thing that arts and culture brings to the table. It just so happens that here in DC is go-go. And I think that same concept can be applied across the board in different areas. No matter where you're from, just like I say in jazz music, New Orleans, you think of jazz music. It may not be protesting with jazz, but there may be something else. Like I say in Chicago, they got juke music. So I just think the culture is very important to use as a tool to gain leverage. So that's why I like to say artists are the new politicians, because that's what we have, basically.
Thank you. All right, Janice, Marcus, and Chioma, this question is for the three of you. Mayor Bowser has been increasingly echoing law and order rhetoric rather than responding to Occupy DC's demands to decrease the MPD budget. We saw the statement that she released the other day to the Attorney General calling for the arrests of protesters, ensuring that they are fully seen through in the judicial system. What is it going to actually take to defund MPD or more incremental goals, such as bringing it into qualified immunity in this political climate? Why don't we start with you, Gigi?
Thank you for that question. I'm a strong believer that the people who bring change in this in the world are not the people who are elected to office. It's usually everyday folks who are showing up, recognizing an issue in their community, and they're doing something about it. The people at Occupy DC are people that I've seen, showing up, doing what they need to do in order to bring a change. So I think in order for us to be able to defund MPD, it's going to take us being organized, us pulling in from different organizations. I was a part of DC Troy Davis, and that's where I came into knowing a lot of organizers from that. And then it evolved when I was also a part of a BLM-DC. I was a part of the first Occupy DC, and every time there's an uprising in this country, more people join the movement, right? And there are different people who are killed by police officers and get inspired by the next thing, and we pull in more people, right? I met each and every one of these folks up here at different points in my trajectory to being conscious and showing up and, you know, organizing the criminal justice system at Occupy DC the first time, right? And organizing in front of Wells Fargo when it was just 10 people. And we said we're gonna show up every Friday in front of Wells Fargo until they stop investing in the criminal justice system, right? Sometimes it just takes small actions like that to build momentum and pull in more people. So what I think it really is what it takes is for us to continue to do those small things and then pull on each other to build a movement. When Janice ran, yada yada, pulling in the go-go, right? BLMDC endorsing her, right? Me being able to say, sis, you got this, you know? And I think it's gonna take all of us to be able to come in at different points and use our skill sets in order to get the change that we're seeking, you know? And when last year, before Janice even ran, we was out there getting signatures trying to register people to vote. Running up in the DC Council building saying, listen, y'all about to pass this budget, this is what we want. Got the whole hundreds of people outside advocating for the same things, bringing consciousness to the people, and like elevating, not even bringing consciousness, elevating the voice of the people. And I think that's what it's gonna take. It's not us, you know, the mayor is not gonna do what she's supposed to do. Never in history, and we're not even just like exclusively say Mayor Bowser, no mayor in history, I can't recall one that did what they were supposed to do. It was the people saying, this is what we want, and we're gonna shut it down until we get it, that we're able to get change.
Thank you. Marcus.
Yeah, I'll agree that as somebody who's worked at City Hall for a number of years, when people show up, they get scared, right, inside the building. City Hall is usually a pretty quiet building, so when people show up, it makes an impact. So that, I mean, I think that's absolutely right, that everyday folks have to show up and keep the drumbeat going because that's what's going to drive real change. I think on a practical note, politically, it's going to take 7 votes on the council. And that means making sure that we take advantage of this election to not just put folks who again, have, you know, the right experience or check the right boxes, but folks who have the tangible experience of racism, of police brutality, of racial injustice, and are going to go to the City Hall every day to fight for that, rooted in those experiences and rooted in community here in DC. So all of us have to use our votes this fall to make sure we have 7 votes in January to make that real. And if for some reason that's not possible, it means using all of our votes in 2022 to elect a new mayor. And quite frankly, and I know we talked about this a little before the panel, it also means making sure that we have leadership in the police department that's not averse to the change that communities are demanding and won't downright deny us the change that we're demanding when we're paying their salaries, right? Now is the time for us inside government to have bold leadership elected and supported by bold voices outside government to get this work done. On issues like economic security and public safety, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to fundamentally change our systems for those folks left furthest behind. And if we don't take advantage of this moment, it won't ever come again. So when people say that this is the most important election of our lifetimes, this election is life or death, tangibly, real, up and down the ballot, whether it is the president, your city council member, your ANC commissioner. What happens, the decisions that are made at these tables over the next 4 years will impact our city for the next 40. And if we don't get serious about that, making sure we have the right leadership and making sure we know that our job in the community doesn't end on election day, but is a constant drumbeat every single day until change comes, then we won't get anywhere. But I believe that there are more people than ever before in our city who believe that, and that's why I'm really confident that that perfect storm is going to happen right now, and we'll be able to take advantage of the moment we've got.
Thank you. Jamie, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, in the words of Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without demand. It never has, and it never will. So if we are going to bring about change, we have to start demanding it. And if we're going to start demanding change, it means everyone showing up in their talent and their ability to do that. Some of us have the role of being agitators and resistors, and that is necessary. And so you ask me, when people say, what do you have to say to the protesters? Keep going. Stay out there. Keep doing what you're doing, because the work you're doing is necessary as the work that I'm going to have to do while on the council. The other thing that I think is important is that we have to also expose and educate. The problem in this city for so long is that people were not, there's been no transparency. And so politicians were able to get away with performative actions even before Black Lives Matter painting. Politicians could do something like support, one of our, a party and come out and shake everyone's hand, but those are the same politicians that were voting on council against the interests of the people and of our families. And so we have to also get to the place of educating so that we can expose. We saw that happen with the last budget hearing. They were about to move money around, and they were about to move money around and take it away from behavioral health, education, health services. And I rang the alarm, right? And many of the people on this panel rang the alarm. Some people went to the council members' doors and were outside of their homes. Some of us were using our voices on policy-wise and saying, listen, we have a $1.2 billion rainy day fund and it's raining. Don't tell us you don't have the money to provide for our community. So when we educate and we expose what's happening, we also can make a difference. The other thing is, since all of us have a role in this, and I'm going to miss actually being on the front lines, on the ground, I will say, and I am going to miss being a resistor and agitator, and I am now taking on a role as being a policymaker. But you better believe that the same people, and that's why it's powerful, because there's no way I would have won my election without BL in DC. And I can tell you that because I had people at 1 in the morning, there were people still in line. Every line I went to, the last person in line said, I'm here because Black Lives Matter DC supported you. I'm here because Sunrise Movement said that you are the environmental candidate. I'm here because DSA said you're going to stand for socialist values, right? It wasn't, people weren't in line because they wanted the status quo. They were in line because they wanted something new, and they wanted leaders who weren't afraid to say defund the police, demilitarize the police. And if you want leaders like that, you also have to start organizing and supporting leaders to be able to get into those positions. So that way, I'm more accountable to you than anyone else, because my vote wasn't bought by developers and PAC money and corporate money. I didn't take a dime or a cent from them. I asked for the people's support, and so I'm going to fight for the people, and I will stay in position as long as I'm leading with the people and the voice of the people. And at the same token, you take what you've already done, what you were able to do with me, and I'm grateful to everyone in this room. Many of the people from Occupy 202 got on the phones for me, were phone banking for me, were sending cards and postcards for me. Do the same for every other politician in this city. We've been asking for you to call on the leadership of firing Peter Newsham. Newsham has been the chief of the police department, and every single time, from the time we had the NEAR Act, we asked for data to be collected, stop and frisk data to be collected. They refused to do it, and guess what? ACLU, DC had to continuously sue. That cost the city money. Officers were caught wearing white supremacist regalia and with words that said, "Let me see your waistband, Mo," on there. And that's the same police department you want us to trust in. We have seen time and time again a refusal, even when we put things in laws. For example, we said we're not going to use tear gas. We said we were not going to use bullets. And guess what? You're still continuing to do that even though we have it in law. So where is the accountability? Because if you're going to really have change, I don't want to just see it on the laws. I want to see that accountability happen. And guess where accountability starts? From the top down. And so if you're not going to be at the top, willing to have accountability and take ownership for the damage and the mistrust you have caused within our community, you don't believe in this community and you don't deserve to lead here. And the thing with understanding the practicality of this is we pay taxpayer dollars. Everyone pays taxpayer dollars, and so you're accountable to us. And in any other field, right? Every other place in our community, if an agency director didn't do their job, they would be kicked out of this city. They would have to resign. We saw it happen again. We saw it even with the past chancellor who got caught up with using his position for his child to go to a certain school. Oh, that chancellor was fired. But Peter Newsham has been continuously doing things for the last couple of, I wouldn't even say 5 to 6 years of just continuously not being accountable to the people and not taking ownership, and yet he remains in place. Why is that allowed to happen here in our community, and why does he continue to get a pass? If we're going to transform the way this city deals with public safety, if you're going to earn back the trust of this community, then that means you're going to have to start being accountable to that community. And so other leaders in the city, when the call was asked, will you call on Peter Newsham to resign? Will you ask the mayor to call on Peter Newsham to resign? And you fail to say, you fail to stand with the people and not call on that, then you're up in 2022. That's what it means. You say, listen, the people are asking for this demand and you're refusing to give it to us. So you know what? The next step is we're going to run somebody against you in the primary. That's how real this has to get. And not only are we going to run somebody against you in the election, we have a whole squad ready to go. We got Yachty ready with the go-go's, okay? You know what I'm saying? No, for real. We got BLMDC ready to squad up. We got Occupy 202 ready to get busy. So believe me when I tell you, we don't need to just, we're going to educate, we're going to expose, we're going to organize, we're going to all use our talents, and we're all going to step up to the plate in whatever way that is. And that's what we have to do to make change in this city. Some of us have to be the policymakers, some of us have to be the resistors, some of us have to be the organizers of mass production like Coachella. Some of us, music also is just a voice of who we are. Some of it is our pride. Some of it is how we deal with trauma. Go-go makes me feel better. It makes me feel ignited. And that's been happening since slavery, because we came over here from Africa. Music brought us over here, and even to get through slavery, we used drums and percussion and things to keep us going. And so for DC residents, especially DC natives, go-go is our war cry. But it's not just it's our war cry that keeps us going. So Yachty keeps us going. Ace, you keep us going. And then Auntie Mimi has been cultivating and building in this community, and she has shown up. BLMDC, from April to Nini to Lorenzo to Makia, I would call them all out. They have been showing up in our community. Kiana's here, been showing up for the homeless community every single day. We are going to show up and show out, because power concedes nothing without demand, and we're here with our demands, and we're going to keep going. Thank you.
Alrighty, so still sort of on this, in this same vein of what's going on with the police here in our country. This is for Joella, Nini, and if somebody else feels so called at the end, I'll see if somebody else wants to weigh in on this one. But police departments around the country have been suiting up in riot gear and physically attacking protesters, journalists. I can say that being there and seeing it firsthand, it's disgusting. Deploying tear gas, pepper spray, and rubber bullets. In recent weeks, both Trump and Mayor Bowser have called on federal agencies to aid in prosecuting BLM protesters. How do we sustain this movement for justice when it is becoming increasingly dangerous to protest? And just sort of to underscore that, how do you prioritize self-care and safety alongside your organizational goals, which is really important, as we know, during this time?
So I believe that protesting has always been dangerous, even though it's protected and it's the core of our First Amendment right. It will always be dangerous to protest. We are literally telling the system that we demand that you change, and of course there's going to be rebuttal. So it's important for sustainability that we provide education, continue to learn our rights, continue to expose, as you said, and really build out understanding the reasons that we're here, and really understanding that truthfully the politics are often controlled by the social powers, right? A lot of people say, I'm not political, I don't really follow politics. And it's like the reason that you live the place that you live, the reason you drive what you drive, every component of your daily life is controlled by politics. And so in order to survive, literally, you have to be in tune with the politics, period. And so education of our communities, because a lot of children, like I myself, I knew what colorism was, I knew what sexism was, I knew what a lot of things were, but I didn't have the name to it. And people were not saying, actually, this is what it is. And so to politicize our children, that the next generation, they're here. A lot of my comrades out there on Black Lives Matter Plaza, they have children that they go home to. So we're fighting for the current, not even the next. Next is community. I definitely have days where I'm like, and I won't be back for a really long time. And I know that there are community that's going to be there when I'm not there. And so to sustain that uprising that a lot of people are saying, keep going, we need to continue to build the community. Because those people who are out there every day that you're telling to keep going, that's been out there for 90 plus days, we're tired. Our mental health, our physical health, people have literally lost their jobs behind this. And so I want to tell everyone on the front lines, period, when you're tired, take a break. When you do not feel like being out there, take a break. When you want to disconnect, and know that there are other people who will be out there on your behalf. And lastly, really to tie back what you're saying, Janice, around voting, I myself, a DC resident and someone who pays very high taxes, I cannot vote. I cannot vote because I'm not a citizen of this country. I cannot put that 7, people in play, but I do yield my people power, right? And I do understand the capabilities that we have to organize. And so if people, literally public servants, who the people put in play, people like me and you, literally walking around like me and you, we talk about systems as a grand scheme of things, but we really need to look at the micro. These are people, regular people, who chose to be in these positions, these jobs, and we can say, actually, we don't want you there anymore. And we actually want the people who have been on the front lines to be there. We actually want people who are directly impacted to be there. We actually want people who have been protesting and know exactly what we the people want to be in line. And I just want to echo the fact of what people are saying around the zip code that you live in, a lot of access that you have. I myself, I want to insert UDC into the conversation, the only public institution and one of 3 in the entire nation to accept undocumented people like myself. We are extremely underfunded. I spend a lot of my time at the fair shot. Oh Lord, I'm not here to be shady. I spend a lot of time advocating for my university because we have entire years of elevators being broken, right? We have professors who are coming from Ivy League institutions that simply want to give back. They have been receiving the same pay since 2012, which was a little bit, right? Not even cost of living. We are a DC government agency, the University of the District of Columbia, and we are the only agency that does not receive, cost of living, literally. And so we talk about education and elevation. To me, access, unfortunately, equals education and what you have access to, right? And so for myself, I was able to organize a lot of people at UDC to be a part of the Black Lives Matter movement. We had our own protest in front of UDC Community College, defund police, emphasis on ICE, right?
That's right.
And my university, we're asking them to make a lot of changes to accommodate for their students, those who are also on the front lines. And we're asking them to do that with no budget, right? So we hold the city accountable in saying that, hey, universities need to be paid. Frontline workers also need to be paid. It shouldn't be up to regular people to put money in Occupy DC's pockets, to put money in BLM DC's pockets, Migration Matters pockets, Frontline Women DC's pockets, all these people's pockets, right? We have $1 billion, over billions of dollars to give to people. And it's unfortunate that there are frontline workers, talk about self-care, who have lost their job behind this. I know them personally, have lost their jobs behind protesting. And they're saying, well, there are organizers who are literally being paid to do this. How do I receive funding? How do I survive? How do I take care of my family? And it should never be that. It should never be, should I work and take care of my family, or should I fight for justice for my community? You shouldn't be out there, period. We shouldn't be fighting, period, right? If people were doing their jobs, we shouldn't have to say continue protesters. If people were doing their jobs, we wouldn't have to say that. But until then, we need to sustain those who are at the front lines with medical assistance as well. I myself am I need to find a therapist. I got to that level. I was like, you know what? Let's check in here.
Yes.
But I can afford to do that. I have access to do that. How are we making sure that people are taken care of, not just financially, but emotionally? How are we making sure that people are truly taken care of? You ask them, what do you need? You can't just say, oh, these are protesters, all they need is masks. All they need is fruit snacks. What do you need? Who is checking in with our community to make sure that they're getting exactly what they need? And then also, who's checking in to make sure that they don't have to continue to be there? Because I don't believe and I don't want my children to be fist up, hands down, guns down, all these chants, these lovely rhythms that we've continued for generations. I don't want that to continue. So to me, self-care for protesters and people who are organizing for this movement would be solving the issues of the movement.
Thank you. Nene, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I will. Because support me. For we are DC, we organize, we strategize, we resist, we heal, and we send Black joy. It's literally a strategy and a formula for this protesting. And honestly, I worry about the Black Lives Matter Plaza protesters, and I thank God for Occupy DC and Mahadi. He reaches out to me and a lot of people and asks for my guidance and support. And what BLMDC don't do is tell what we do. And so a lot of people don't know what BLMDC do. But we do have rapid response. And with rapid response, you gotta have a system. You have to have a system in place. And you can't just have anybody in place. You have to have people where you organize and you trust in place. You have to have a medic squad that is actually trained to be a medic squad. You have to have marshals. You have to have legal observers there at all times. You have to have jail support. So what I would ask people to do is please donate to jail support and NLG. It is essential to keep this movement going. But I will also state that protesting and in the streets every day won't be the only solution to solve this problem. You have to target the people who hold the power. You have to go to them, as Janice said, go to their house, make them uncomfortable. But yet, with today, we literally have people and people being snatched. So I'm going to advise the protesters to be very careful right now. You have to pay attention and know how they move and how they strategize. I thank God that we have resources that can communicate to us to let us know, yo, chill, right? And unfortunately, a lot of the new protesters don't have that, and I personally try to build community with all of them so that I can give them this knowledge, but it's not a gatekeeper thing, it's a wisdom thing that I want to keep you safe. And so I can only do as much as I can by trying to give you the wisdom of what's going to work and what's not going to work. So my advice to you is with this, is other ways to protest and resist. Yadi will tell you, yo, nigga, did we shut the white supremacists down? We took that go right there and we silenced them when they thought they were going to come on Freedom Plaza and talk about white supremacists. Oh no, we went right to the next part. I called up Yadi, I said, yo, what's up? I need you. I need us to have a party. We will send a Black joy while they try to talk about empowering white supremacy. So having a Black block party is resistance. Yeah. Literally just having like being able to boycott something that's impactful is resistance. Sitting in the Wilson building is resistance. Like blocking the entrance to the Wilson building is resistance. But you have to have a strategy, you have to have tools in place to do things like that. You just can't go, because reality is you gotta know what the DC community want. And right now, the DC community is because you don't build community, they're resisting what's going on, and it's giving the police power to fight Black Lives Matter Plaza. Because the community is against it because they seeing people don't look like me. And they like, nah, y'all tearing up our city. But fuck the property, because people own property and the property can be rebuilt. But understand that the community don't see that. They just see a building getting burned or a trash can, and so they're resisting against the protest, and it's giving the police and Mayor Bowers of power to fucking fuck up the protesters on BLM Plaza because there's no respect. You don't ever see nobody mess with Black Lives Matter DC because they know we'll shut this whole city down because we were mobilized. And that's what you gotta be able to do. You gotta be able to mobilize. And right now, this is what's happening in Boston right now because the police station, one of my comrades' life was being threatened by white supremacy. So she felt the need to fill a police report. Even though we know the police don't keep us safe. But this was her only resource when she thought because she's in Boston by herself. That police report got leaked to the white supremacists. So therefore now we have to mobilize nationally to keep my black sisters safe in Boston on Tuesday. Protect black women. So the only way that she's gonna get safe is we mobilize as a nation to keep my black sisters safe. So there's more to this than that. You guys gotta realize the bus boy, that boycott lasted a year. And it made a difference. You gotta find other ways. Because right now, the way that Trump got things set up, it's federal charges. It's felonies. Right now, I know for a fact as a comrade that's on BLM Plaza that Black Lives Matter DC is trying to help right now. And the charges are fucking dumb. But because they can charge a goddamn pig if they want to. Denise will tell you this. If the charges ain't real, because we do court support, Kiana right there, we're in the courts every day. We see it every day. We have participatory defense, we educate the community, and I beg these people to take these educational classes that we're teaching. We teach participatory defense, we teach know your rights, we teach how to direct action, we teach cop watch. We got the classes to educate you, but you gotta educate yourself while you're up there and have knowledge on what you're doing. It's great to resist and starve, but then at the end, you gotta build power. And this is how this is gonna last.
Thank you so much for that. Alrighty, so the next question is again on the lines of protesting and mobilizing, but in light of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing, do you anticipate protests to prevent Trump from appointing another justice in the coming weeks? And what would it mean for us if he succeeds and the conservatives get a 6-3 majority? And I just want to let you guys know, we're going to only have about 2 or 3 people answer this one because I want to open it up for the audience. But whoever feels so called, I heard some hemming and hawing on that one, but whoever feels so called to take that question.
Denise, you got that?
Yeah,
I was there last night, look.
All right, real quick, I definitely think people are going to be protesting like crazy, just like when Kavanaugh was about to get his seat. We were going crazy outside the White House. We're going to get the same thing when Trump appoints whoever the hell he got up his sleeve to the 6 seats to make the 6-3 majority. When that happens, we're going to be in deep trouble. Rest in peace to RBG, but she definitely was one of the last liberal justices that we had, so someone that was truly for the people. So I think we definitely going to have to do some protesting and some mobilizing and much more than that to actually get somebody credible in there, someone that actually be for the people. So that's my short answer.
thank you. Anybody else?
I want to get that, because I was there last night.
Okay, yeah.
I was there last night, and I was supposed to speak. And I constantly heard the same people. I was supposed to sleep. It started at 8:15, and they had me to speak at 8:50. At 9:05, I hadn't spoken. There was the same people up there saying the same thing about thank you, you're such a good person, reproduction, justice. Black people got more problems than just our vagina, but I want to be clear. And so therefore, when I asked to speak, there was like 9 people in front of me. I said, peace, I'm out. Because in reality, the court doesn't represent justice. It determines what is legal and what is not illegal. It don't determine what is moral and what is just. It's unfortunate that 9 people can actually determine what you can do with your body and how you live. What you should be trying to do is dismantle a non-system justice system. You got to keep fighting and resisting. The court system don't keep you safe either. Be very clear. So therefore, with that, what I'm saying with that, don't stop fighting. I'm not worried about it. She didn't make a difference in our black life anyway. She was the one that told Carlin that it was dumb that he took a knee. No shame. Rest in peace, my RBG. But be clear, Indigenous Road, she voted against it. So be clear, she did some good stuff. But know that we got to keep her safe. And we got to build keep organizing and resisting, and get a system like a non-people determining what is right or wrong for you out of that system. That's another system that needs to be dismantled.
Thank you. Marcus, I saw you wanted to, and then Joella will wrap it up with you.
Yeah, just very quickly, I think I think there are a lot of people who are thinking that a replacement before the next election or before inauguration is going to permanently break our judicial system. I just want to underscore that our judicial system is broken right now.
Say it again.
Right, so for all of the reasons that were stated before, but also because the Republicans in Congress spent 8 years blocking President Obama's appointments to federal courtships across the country. And when Trump came in, he was able to appoint over 200 people to federal benches, right, across the country who are going to decide cases that are going to be life or death long before they ever get to the Supreme Court. So if we're talking about how to fix our judicial system, Democrats in the new year are going to have to get serious about actually fundamentally reforming what the judicial system looks like, because the way both the rules and the people on it are set up right now is permanently broken for a generation. And so we've got to do that, but we've also got to make sure that we're electing black prosecutors and prosecutors of color, more women prosecutors, to make sure that we actually make sure that some bullshit cases don't ever make it to court for a judge to decide. Right? All of those things have to be a part of our game plan. But I think, I'm heartbroken by Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing, but it is, quite frankly, just another nail in what I think is a coffin to America's judicial system right now.
Thank you. And Joella, before you start, I just want to remind our audience to please submit questions and comments. Thanks to all those who have done so already. We're getting them, and we'll try to get to as many as you as we can. Please submit questions.
So I personally am fickled in emotion around the passing, rest in peace, of course, and as well as a DACA recipient. DACA is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival. As a DACA recipient and a recent win for over 650,000 people, RBG was definitely monumental in achieving that win with the 5-4 win at the Supreme Court. I definitely want to reinforce that shouldn't have even been the case. People should not have been able to determine so many people's fate and literally can disrupt the day-to-day lives of people based on one vote. So the system that we have right now does not and should not remain continuing forward. And I know that this also makes the upcoming election even more important. The people that we put in charge is even more important, but also people are like, we need, I don't like people, but now you just said it, so now I feel bad. But people are like, we need more black judges. But those are black people putting other black people in jail. Like, we also have to we congratulated a black woman for being like the youngest, for being a judge in her state, but then that also means that she had to lock a lot of people up to get in that position, right? So once again, rethinking the system that RBG worked for, because we don't know her personally, we don't know what kind of person she was, but in being a black person, I'm black, that won recently because of her. I'm immensely grateful, but also as a protester, I acknowledge that she said Kaepernick was dumb and disrespectful. So, you're able to hold all of these emotions and also wish people well.
That's it. Thank you. Oh yes, please.
As a resident attorney.
I was gonna say, I thought you were gonna be the first to ask.
Well, you know what? Because I've been dealing with the emotion, and I've been learning to process things as they happen now. And at Howard Law School, we spend a lot of time reading the Supreme Court decisions and dissents and everything that's happening. We also just kind of understand the power system that's at play between judges and the lawyers and the system. What I will say right now is that the Democratic Party needs to squad up as much as they possibly can right now. McConnell and Lindsey Graham and the Republicans stopped Obama's appointment, and they said they did it. They're on record saying that they did it because there's a president about to come in, and so there shouldn't be appointment. And so if they choose this opportunity to try to go back on their word, we need to fight like hell. A 6-3 conservative Supreme Court would be devastating to reproductive rights. It would be devastating to civil rights. It would be devastating to immigrant rights. They will literally roll back everything we've worked hard for the last 60 years. We're talking about our parents' generation and coming and before that, our grandparents' generation. Everything we fought for, they will try to roll back. So, and I need the House Democrats to literally squad up the way Republican the House does, right? They better, I don't care, you better filibuster, you better block, you better put every piece of legislation that needs to happen because we cannot afford an appointment. Judges, unfortunately, in the power system that we are in, have a lot of discretion and power. And I do not think we should be conceding power in any of these structures while we try to dismantle it. And so judges decide people's sentences. They decide what is allowed. The effect judges have, even in Georgia, you see down in Georgia, the level of voter disenfranchisement and decision after decision, they have allowed votes, 500 votes, 500,000 votes to be thrown out. A judge decides that. So I need everybody to understand that the power that's at play here, that a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court will be devastating to every single group that has been fighting LGBTQ rights, immigrant rights, gender equality, all of that. Everything is on the line. And so everybody needs to start fighting and acting like everything is on the line. We need to flip the Senate. We need to maintain the House. We need to flip local offices too. Don't lose focus because if we want to end qualified immunity, that's on a state level, right? We're trying to end qualified immunity here in the district. Everybody's trying to end qualified immunity. You can't end qualified immunity with politicians that are bought by police unions, okay? And until you dismantle police unions and you get rid of politicians who are connected with the police union and defend them no matter what they do, we won't be there. So local elections, you need to squad up. National and Congress, Senate, you need to squad up right now. And to our allies, and I'm speaking to our white allies, if you have the power, the resources, whether it's money, whether it's time, whether it's energy, then you should be getting into one of these elections or multiple of these elections and giving what you can of your money and of your time. That is what allyship would look like. No matter which fight you're fighting, that's what it would look like. Showing up, donating to people's campaigns, and doing the work that needs to get done. If the Republicans try to renege, we need to fight, and we need to make sure that they do not go back on their word. And I mean, we need to occupy every single place in this city, the Supreme Court, all the way to the city council offices.
Thank you. Again, I just want to thank all those that are tuning in at home and engaging with us and being active in this conversation. We really appreciate it. So Makia Green has 2 questions. So, look, giggles in the room. No, at least on my side, she did not specify, so people feel free. What I will do in the journalism world, when we give people a quick moment, we call it hot takes. So I'm going to put on my timer. That's why my phone's going to go off. 45 seconds for y'all to give your comments just for time purposes. All right, so Makia's 2 questions. Can panelists speak about ways that we center the most impacted by police violence? That's the first. And this sort of is along the same lines. Do you think that the city does enough to target and disrupt violence in the home and violence against women, both cis and trans? Thank you, Makia, for those awesome questions. Anybody want to weigh in on that? And I am setting my timer so we know that everybody can get their thoughts in. Who wants to go first? Don't know, speak your words. Joella.
I believe that the way that we help center the most marginalized is we empower them and we give them the resources. We don't need to speak on behalf of anyone. We allow them to be at the table, that shouldn't exist, be at the table and tell you exactly what kind of meal they would like. And moving forward to the second question around protecting women and of all kinds, is I don't believe that we properly protect women in this city. And we talk about that a lot in the movement of the lack of names that we can even share. And we know that there's gender-based violence as well, which should be included in violence against women, not just police brutality. And because of that layer, oftentimes a lot of women are suffering in their own homes. And we have to talk to them and find and direct resources to women so that they can fully be supported.
Perfect, thank you. Of course. So, part of the reason why I'm in this room is about Black women. And I, you know, the lack of support that we have around us, and I will not say that there is none. And I'm not going to speak too deeply on myself, but I'm a survivor of a lot of things, as we probably all are up here. And the fact that I can say that we probably all are, and so many of us are from here, is a problem. It's a big problem for me. I would say this one thing: I was not going to be in the world by choice because of the lack of protection around me. And I come, and so when we talk about police brutality towards men, women, cis, trans, all of it, it's such an immediate thing that needs to be addressed, because we are a strong, beautiful people, right? As women, we are suffering. We are suffering. And so the idea that it's not just about killing, you know what I'm saying? There are levels to protection. And so many of us are in the room for a gamut of reasons. But yeah, no, we're not doing that. So let's all be on that side too.
Thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in on Makia's questions? Mimi, thank you.
I just want to say sex work is work, and this is why we try to pass the bill to decriminalize sex work. Period. Black trans women are the most vulnerable people here in DC, and sex work is work. And so we need to protect Black women and trans women.
Thank you. The next question is from Instagram, and it's from Sex Behave. Hey girl. What are small steps we can take towards an alternative economic system? Small steps towards an alternative economic system. Marcus.
I'll say we shouldn't take small steps. I think we need to build economic security for everyone right now. And this is just another shameless plug for a guaranteed income program, right? And we're also past the conversation about whether something like that is possible, because everybody got a check this summer, right? So we know it's possible to build economic security, but do it sustainably over time. It's something that Dr. King talked about before he was killed in 1968. It's something that mayors and localities around our country are doing, and it's making a real impact on people's lives. It's not just bringing them out of poverty, not just making sure that they're not one paycheck or one emergency away from homelessness or from desperate poverty. It's also giving them the room, right? We also have to realize that poverty has a physical and emotional impact, right? And when you give people the room to operate outside of a box, right, which is poverty, then you give them more opportunity to thrive. And that's what something like big ideas like that would do for poor folks across the country.
Thank you.
I agree with Marcus on universal basic income and championing that. I think other small steps we can make, I don't even think they're small. Right now we can cancel rent. Right now we can cancel student loan debt, which is keeping us behind, especially Black people and the Black wealth. In addition to that, we could provide Medicare for all. In addition to that, we can provide universal child care, since families are averaging using all of their income on child care costs. Those are ways we could make changes right now in this current landscape to be able to allow people to be able to afford to stay here, to be able to get health costs at this time. We literally have people who won't go to the hospital right now because they're scared, because they can't afford to go to the hospital. So if you want to talk about ways we can do that, all of those things are possible. We know it's possible because we bailed out the banks, we bailed out Wall Street a number of times, way more money than it would have cost us to have Medicare for all, way more money than it would cost us to cancel student loan debt. So let's get it done. That's the change we need. It's not minor, but it's major, and it needs to happen to change our system.
I just had one more small thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to, because it triggered me when you were like, everybody gets a stimulus check. And I want to emphasize the fact that we are all Black, period. Immigration is a Black issue. And I'm centering the immigrants because that is my duty and that is what God put me here for. And I understand that no immigrant that is not a citizen received a stimulus check despite paying taxes, despite having an ITT and number. And I know that 1.2 million Americans did not receive a stimulus check simply because they were married to an immigrant, married to someone who was not a citizen, right? But I also know that my community keeps me safe. I have received so much money and resources from my community because they know that. And so these alternative ways of creating an economy, we do that. We have the mutual, freedom fighters have a mutual aid fund. You have a mutual, a lot of our organizations have mutual aid. We've been taking care of each other. We have been subsidizing in ways that the government, and when the government have not taken care of us, we've taken care of us, right? So once again, we keep plugging to donate, but this is why, because we acknowledge numerous times that the government is not doing their job. They're not using our money for us. What we're doing is taking care of each other. So continuing to build and create in our own economies, period. A lot of under the table loans that we have to do because we cannot create a bank account, we do that. A lot of the food, supplying food from churches, praise God, we do that, right? So continuing to build and foster community is in the ways that we've continued to done. That's a lot of the reason that I'm sitting in this chair right now is because people have taken care of me, not because of the government, right? So thank you to everyone who has been taking care of us during COVID-19 and long before it, and continue to do that work. And we are also going to help you do that work.
Thank you. This next question is from Alex Friedman, and it's also from Instagram. How can we bring this discussion to our schools for the younger generations to continue our fight? And I believe that'll probably be our last one. So for all those who'd like to weigh in, or if the whole panel wants to weigh in on that, please. Still get 45 seconds.
Yeah. So in 2016, as a core organizer with BLM, there were a lot of young people showing up. And one of the things that I was able to do was to organize with them and start Melanin Uprising, which was a youth-led collective in Washington, D.C. And one of the things that we implemented was similar to what I experienced when I was growing up, determined to take a stand, was we had young people facilitating workshops with other young people, because adults are not always the person that young people want to listen to. Young people want to listen to people who are in their age range. So we had different organizers from the community come in, talk to our young people, and they would create curriculum and go into the school system and talk to other young people about the ways in which they could organize, not only in their community, but within their schools. So one instance was, people felt like the uniform policy in their school was very repressive or oppressive, and they wanted to do things in order to change that within their school. So they created, they went in, they talked to the young people, helped them come up with a plan so they can go and talk to the administration. So I think one of the ways in which we can do it is organize young people so that they can go into the schools and talk to other young people about the ways in which they could organize.
Thank you. Yadi.
You go, girl. Alright, so yeah, real quick, through our partnership with the AFSC, Long Live Go-Go, we now own our own curriculum, actually. It's a human rights, social action, and Go-Go curriculum. It's currently being taught in Dunbar through virtual learning, and we will expand it to Roosevelt and a few other schools next semester. But I think that's very important that we have that to be able to build that connection with the kids in schools and get them to, and actually usher them into doing the same work we're doing. And like a lot of us have been talking about, people don't know their rights. Like Joella was saying, politics essentially determines how we can move around in society. So I think it's very important that we do have the connection with the kids, but we also teach them that they're not too young to make an impact and make some type of change in the community that they frequent every day. And sometimes I think that people, like you said, they look at the system as this grand thing and that it's beyond them, and it's, what can I do by myself? But politics, like I learned from the senator in Oregon, politics is a bubble up effect, so it does start on the ground level. So like you were saying, you going to Wells Fargo every day, that could spark a movement. And also we need music back in public school. We need greater investment in music education. Like Ace was saying, it's not just about people learning instruments or how to read music. It's also very therapeutic, you know what I mean? It helps your mind develop different ways and just helps you become more open-minded. So I think that we really do need to put a greater investment into, music in the schools, and also, like you all were saying, community centers, just more outlets for the youth. The youth don't have any outlets, you know what I mean? And I'm sorry to go past your 45 seconds, but I just want to say this. It's like on 14th Street, you look at number 10 Boys and Girls Club, right? And then you see like a big condo being developed right next to it. It's like, damn, you're showing what is important to you, right? And then like, who's supposed to be living in all these condos? Like, you're supposed to be making 3 times your rent, and the rent's $3,000, $2,500. Like, come on, it's ridiculous. So I just thought I can't fathom the amount of money that you truly need to make to live comfortably, right, and not be in the rat race. And that's why I think a lot of people are stuck at, especially us as being a black and brown community. Like I say, single mother households, all these things. Like, it's just not. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't add up. So I just think the kids need more outlets. As far as the economy, we need to turn our passion into profit, and we need to, move from a mindset of begging and feeling like somebody to give us something and just empower ourselves. So that's basically the mindset.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to put that in the fashion because
Nene, Joella, and just education, I assume.
right, because you talking about youth, so I think everybody want to talk about these youth because the reality is, shout out to BYP 100 that their slogan is Build Black Futures.
Yes.
And I don't have time to tell you guys the mandate for black people, for the movement for black lives, but I want you guys to research it and Google it by Murray Hooks, the mandate for black people. And I want you guys to read that because we believe that we have to do the work for our future generation. And shout out to them bringing Black Lives Matter in schools. Black Lives Matter DC, every year I personally go to the schools during Black Lives Matter week and build relationships with the youth in the communities. And I'm kind of like prejudice and, I should be racist. There's gonna be so many schools, but I purposely won't go to a school that's white. I try to go to the inner city so I can hear what the ones that's oppressed, the youth that's oppressed, to get their words out. And also Black Swan, we building like Millennium. We still have relationship with all of you. Anybody, you go to my page, you can see, ain't nothing but me and you. Black Girl Tribe, I believe in building black futures because our youth is the ones that's gonna get us free. And they gonna reap the benefits of the work that we do.
Thank you.
I also think it's really important that we address ageism. And children often, like I said, I feel like I was politicized, but I did not know the politics, right? And so, like we said, most directly impacted people, they know exactly what they want and what they need. But when the children speak, do we listen? Do they have a platform to speak? And then where is that, like what happens after I attend the town hall? What happens after I say, DCPS, they had a petition that said we want African American studies to be mandated in our schools. What's happening with that petition? They said we want to learn more about us in our school. Period. The students came up with that. It's like, okay, after we empower the children, then what? And I hope that we're empowering them. That's my 2 pieces.
I have one sentence. Kids need conversation, which is literally just like exactly what everybody else is saying, so I don't have much to say on that, but it's like we have to look at them like little humans, not like short human beings that actually have opinions. And I think that, looking at, forget that. I said what I need to say. Kids need conversations, and it's very, very complex, but it's also super simple. It's like we have to talk to them from wherever we can, whatever community, if it's a parent, if you notice that a parent's not doing it, if you're in the community, you're in the child's life, you're going into the schools, just no matter how you get to them, they want to be respected and heard because they see what we're doing out here. You know what I mean? Like I spoke to 40 kids last week and I saw a ton of kids, but they're like, how do I get involved? And it's like they want to do the work, so we have to talk. And there's so many different ways to do it. We're talking.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll use my short time just to talk about, I think, the work that we're able to lead from the State Board of Education. Our students have been demanding for years that the curriculum that they're learning, especially the social studies, is honest, is culturally relevant, and is blatantly anti-racist. And so the State Board is starting a multi-million-dollar, multi-year process to rewrite our social studies standards to accomplish just that. And we're revising revising those social studies standards for the first time since 2006, which actually predates the current State Board of Education. So I'm proud of that work, and what we know and what we've learned at the table is that there should be no curriculum that talks about slavery without also talking about African kingdoms, right? There should be no curriculum that talks about dogs in Birmingham but doesn't talk about COINTELPRO, right? There should be no curriculum that talks about, right, how Martin marched but doesn't talk about how the Panthers built community and organized and challenged systems so much that the entire government worked to destroy them, right? Those should be things, our children should see themselves in what they're learning, and they're not, which is why I'm proud of the work we're beginning to start now.
Thank you.
I was just going to add on to what Marcus is saying about anti-racism, but I'm reading a book by Ibram Kendi called Stamped from the Beginning. And it frames three types of people: racist, assimilationists, and anti-racist. And we have to let kids know that respectability politics does not change systematic racism. And we need to encourage our children to achieve educationally, but also to be anti-racist at the same time. And we have to stop selling them this dream of an American dream when it is absolutely not possible for them. Even if they get a good education, they are still stuck in this system of oppression. And we also have to let this generation define what their civil rights movement is going to look like. And so if they wanted to say defund the police, and you keep telling them, oh, you guys need to change your name, change your branding, this is their movement. You had a civil rights movement, let them have their movement and define and decide what they want to say. And it's up to our generation. I know that our parents' generation is scared for young people because of what's happening in our community. But I think it's important that we recognize how this fear happened. And that is our parents' generation. I was saying this to Chi-Chi, we talked about it. There was a time where those of us who spoke up in the Black community from our parents' generation, where we had about 5 years of continued assassinations. It was Medgar Evans. Then it was Fred Hampton, then it was Harry and Harriet Moore, and then it was Malcolm X, and then it ended with MLK, right? And so Black leaders who were talking about ending cycles of poverty, who were talking about socialist thought, all of those Black leaders got killed, assassinated, because they were talking about what we're bringing up. And so our parents' generation, after having those assassinations happen, went to a state of fear. And many of them at that moment became assimilationists, and they accepted capitalism out of fear. And they taught us not to listen to people like Angela Davis. They taught us not to listen to people like Cornel West. They're radical, they're crazy, don't listen to them. And so we kind of, in our own right, bought into that cycle too. And so now we're at a place where we're realizing that what they sold us, this idea, was false and not real. And now we're in a moment of reckoning as a country for lies that were sold to us a long time ago, right? And so we understand that our parents' generation is operating from a place of fear. But now is the time for our parents' generation to say, you know what? We let them suppress our movement. When Martin Luther King died, at the end, he was talking about ending cycles of poverty, talking about socialist thought, education, social security. He said, we are here at the steps of the memorial to cash a check, that hasn't been given to us, right? And then he was assassinated. But on MLK Day, they always just talk about the nice Martin Luther King. But Martin Luther King was all about us uplifting our community. This is our moment of reckoning. So I need our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation to stand with the young people and allow them to have this movement, to fight this fight, because this is a moment of reckoning for our country. And unless there is going to be some atonement and recognition for all of this, we cannot move forward, and we will not move forward.
Thank you. First of all, can we give this amazing panel a round of applause? First of all, shout out to the panel who had to clap for y'all. It's not very many of us in the Thank you very much. But it really is beautiful to see that. I believe it was Yada who said We may not all be fighting in the same way, but we're all moving in the same direction, and it's so beautiful to see that happening. As a storyteller, telling what you guys are doing on the front lines, I just want to say, please keep doing what you're doing, and just know that there are a lot of people standing behind you, and really need that push to go out and stand with you. So thank you for doing that. In 10 seconds, can you all please just tell the people how to find you and how to either keep up with what you're doing in your movement or join along? And I really mean 10 seconds, y'all. Alrighty, let us start with Marcus.
Yeah, I'll just say very quickly, you can follow me on all social media platforms at Marcus for DC, MarkusFordC. The K is very important this year, so please do. Marcus for DC.
What's your number on the ballot?
We're number 7 on the ballot.
Look.
Council, thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right, Ace.
Hey, I am IAMACEONO. I am Ace Ono on all my social platforms.
Thank you. Joella.
That's Joella on Twitter, Joella, but quit your job officer on Instagram, Facebook, Joella Roberts, Migration Matters DC.
Thank you. G.
On Twitter and Instagram, I'm rebellove_, so REBELLOVE_, and on Facebook, I am Chioma Iwuha, however it's shown up on the screen in front of you.
All right, Nene.
On all platforms, Nene Tay, NEETAY, but about 8 times out of 10 you won't get on my page. My page is private because I do this work for Grow and Not Show. But you can find Black Lives Matter DC on Facebook and Instagram, and at DMV Black Lives if you want to follow the work.
Thank you. Janice.
Yes, I'm at Janice4DC, JANEESE, and the number 4DC on Instagram as well as Twitter. You can also go to Janice Lewis George on Facebook and Janice4DC.com to go to my page.
And yada yada.
Okay. Okay. I don't know how to do this. Okay.
I mean, I know I'm negative, so you know.
Right. It's a key.
You follow me at yada yada YADDIYA. Please don't call me your dear. But long live go DC. Please don't make me spell it. Long live go DC. Yada yada. Long live go DC. Shout out to my team. Nothing without them. Miss Kelsey, Big Wayne. And,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi.
Thank you. Oh, I guess I gotta say mine too. So my Instagram is Mimi P Green, MIMI, and my Twitter is Misha P Green, and Facebook is Misha Green or Mimi Patrice Green. I don't know. MICHA. I'm the only one, so it's super easy to find me. And then also, please follow the Black Media Authority Afro-American newspapers. You can follow us at Afro News everywhere. And then, of course, you have to follow our host, Occupy DC. Occupy DC 202 on Instagram. And I believe is it Occupy DC 202 on Twitter as well? Yeah, so please follow our host. Thank you so much for putting together this amazing panel, Occupy DC. This has been so rewarding. We have to get the birthday boy up here to say a few words. Thank you so much, Eugene. Can someone just pass Eugene mic actually?
Oh yeah, come to Bocello on Tuesday. We down gallery 6 to 9.
Yes.
We up. All right. Well, I want to say thank you guys so much for being here. I want to thank all of our amazing panelists for speaking their mind and telling us exactly how they feel about these issues. I want to thank our amazing team at Occupy DC for all of the hard work that we put in. It really showed because this went off without a single hitch. I want to thank the people that are back at home for tuning in and being there to view all the amazing ideas and thoughts that were shared in this room. I want to thank our tech person, Mr. Morel. He's done an amazing job in making sure that the stream went without a hitch and everything was super duper clear. I want to thank Busboy and Poets for allowing us to be in their space and really helping us to set up this amazing event. This is also beautiful. And I don't really know what else to say other than you can follow us at Occupy DC 202. We do have some words to close out on, and I'm going to bring up Mahadi for that.
Yeah, well, Eugene did most of the thanks. Thank you to all the panelists for your incredible answers. It's been really thoughtful and thought-provoking. I want to thank some of the organizations that really helped us out along this journey. Thank you to Freedom Fighters DC, Concerned Citizens DC, BLMH Co-op, Until Freedom Organizing, the Calm Collective. Thanks to Earl's First Amendment Ground. Thanks to DC Protest, Medics for Justice. Thanks to each and every person that's been out there protesting with us, even though you're not part of any organization. Thanks to the frontliners. Thanks to Long Live Go-Go DC. Mochella, thanks to Migration Matters. Like Yadi said, the next action is this Tuesday. They're having a go-go down gallery, September 22nd, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. If you don't know what down gallery means, like, you know, so to close this, I want to say that even though this panel is over, this conversation is over tonight, that doesn't mean that this is the end. There have been a lot of amazing points brought up, and the next thing to do now is for all of you at home and everyone watching, let's discuss these amongst ourselves. Take these discussions to your workplace, to your schools. Let's talk about these things and figure out a way to change the society we live in. This is only the beginning of the fight. It's been a long time, but this is really only the beginning. And we need to keep fighting. Thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful night.
And make sure y'all get home without a hitch. Shout out to Eugene birthday.